Hi, it's Devlin with Motorwork, and today we're going to be doing a walk around and buyer's guide of this 2011 BMW 1M. This is a car we're consignment selling, but we figured we'd make a video on what to look for when buying one of these cars specifically. These cars are delightful. They sold 957 in the North American market. This is one of 222 Canadian spec models. This is actually 196, I believe, of the 222 Canadian sold. There were 5 other cars optioned like this, so it is quite a rare combination. This one has been driven a decent amount. It's about 109,000 kilometers. It means it was enjoyed, it was driven, it has done a lot of road trips. It's a delightful little car, so we'll go through the common failure areas, what you would look out for when buying one of these, and we'll also just showcase you this car in case you're interested in buying it. If the link is down in our description, that means it's been sold, and you can just enjoy this as a buyer's guide. First off, we'll go into the principle of the 1M. What it was is basically a skunkworks project. The engineers at the team at BMW decided they wanted to make this, but they weren't really given the permission to do so. So they made it kind of behind closed doors and then unveiled it, and it was okayed once it was all put together. It's got M3 suspension front and rear. The only parts that are actually specific to the 1M are the body panels. These flared wheel arches aren't shared by the 1 Series, and they're definitely not from the 3 Series. The clutches from this car, it's a dual mass flywheel and a specific clutch. There is a conversion to a single mass flywheel as well, and some of the interior components are different to the 1 Series. Some of the things you want to look out for when buying one of these is these front headlights. They're very expensive to replace, so double check that both of them are functioning when you first see the car. You'll want to walk around, and like I said, these wheel arches, because they're specific to the 1M, you want to make sure they have no body damage. Because it's a low production number car, the front bumper, the wheel arches, the rear wheel arches, they would all be hard to find parts for if you had to buy them aftermarket, because there's not as much availability as you would find in a 135. So that's more expensive to replace, so you want to make sure that they're all in good condition in case you have to replace them. Other things you might want to look out for is any paint condition. This orange is special to this car as well, so you want to make sure there's no excessive rock chips, scratches, dents, or dings that would cause you to have to get those fixed down the road in case you want the car to be up to the level of perfection that you want. These rims are really nice, but they're quite expensive to replace, so you want to make sure that you look for any curb rash, anything that would have been damaging to them that you would have to replace down the road. Things you might want to look out for on these type of cars. This car has an aftermarket exhaust. It's got a Dynon exhaust and a Dynon tune on it. Dynon is one of the premier BMW tuning companies, and so you can trust that it was a decent quality, but that's the kind of thing you want to look out for when buying one of these cars. Double check that the aftermarket components, if it has any, are reputable, if the name carries any weight to it, and if it's a good company, if they have receipts and time when it was done. You want to know that the car, if it's been modified well in a way that won't devalue it down the road or hurt its reliability. Dynon, as I said, is one of the premier BMW tuning companies, so I would trust this setup entirely. There were 3 options you could get in the Canadian market cars, whether or not they had power seats, an infotainment setup in the center screen, and a phone connectivity setup. This car has 2 of those options. If you are interested in which options your car has or the one that you're looking at has, on the BMW 1M forums there's actually a spreadsheet attached to a couple of them that tells you exactly what VIN number has what options, and that's how we know this car was optioned for the cars sharing the same specs. The bolstering on the seat is what can get damaged in a car like this. A 2-door coupe that's low, you're kind of going to be hitting it a lot, so that's something you'll want to check out for. Same with the inside of this lower bolstering. You want to check the interior to make sure there's no rips, scratches, or anything that's damaged to it, because it's something you might have to repair down the road. This car is immaculate inside. It's been really well cared for. The owner was very meticulous in keeping it clean. This car drives really well with no check engine lights. It's been well maintained by the previous owner. He has a booklet of paperwork that'll come with it on what's all been done. It has 108,000 kilometers. From the driver's seat, the interior is in immaculate condition. All of the Alcantara is in great shape. It's not too shouty, but it does make a nice noise. It doesn't drone or anything on the highway. When you roll into it, it does make a nice sound. The nice thing about how they built the 1M is they used a lot of M3 parts. Rear suspension, the front suspension, so when you're driving it, if you do hear any noises, it is fairly easy to get parts for them because it borrows it from the larger car. And one of the things that makes the 1M so great is the hydraulic power steering. After this, they went to electric, and it is a delightful thing to drive. Luckily, this is a pretty reliable system. You won't see that many issues with it. It's pretty easy. Turbochargers in these cars can wear out, so you want to roll into it once or twice just to make sure it does boost. And I'm not talking about going for a joyride in someone else's car, just making sure that it does build boost without any excessive noise or smoke coming out the back of the car. This one's really sound. When checking the service history in one of these cars, there are a couple things you want to look for. Turbocharger rebuilds, if it's got over 80,000 miles, it's quite likely they could use one. Something you wouldn't normally think about is the condition of the battery directly affects how long the turbos might last. If you own one of these or are buying one of these, make sure you keep a healthy battery in it. What the car will do after you've turned it off is actually run the water pump to keep parts cool after you've turned it off, just to make sure that it continues moving coolant around to the places that might have hot spots. If the car notices its voltage is too low though, it won't run that. So by keeping a healthy battery in this car, it'll actually help your turbochargers last longer because they'll get better cooling. Try not to hit any amounts of boost until you get to about 180 degrees or higher on the coolant temperature. That just helps the turbos properly warm up. The last thing about the turbochargers is a gasket on the wastegate that will fail sometimes, causing the car to have a rattle. That's what you're listening for when you're driving it, whether or not you can hear a rattle under the hood. Generally, this will affect boost as well, so you'll probably get a low boost code, but there are people reporting wastegate rattles with full boost, so you want to listen for it as well as check to see if it drives well. The N54 has direct injection, which means there's a couple of things you want to look out for as well. The high pressure fuel pump is under a lot of strain to give 2,000 to 3,000 psi of fuel pressure to the fuel injectors in the fuel rail. That means it can go, and after about 80 to 120,000 miles, you'd probably be looking into replacing it, if not for a problem, for safety. On top of that, the injectors can sometimes have issues, so we do recommend getting a scanner on it or getting it inspected to make sure there's no inconsistency between the injectors. The other problem with the direct injection system is that it doesn't spray fuel over the intake valves, and they cause carbon buildup. So if you don't have any record of carbon cleaning happening every 40 to 60,000 miles, it's likely going to need to get done. It's not that expensive of a job, it's just something you'll have to budget into place. When you're driving it around, you also want to make sure you take some tight, slow speed maneuvers, to see if there's any groaning from the differential. Once they've been driven hard, that neat locking differential, which I believe is from the E92, does have trouble sometimes where it'll make noise as if it's been driven hard most of its life. That'll be a good indicator of the car's usage or if the diff needs a service. Regular oil changes treat BMW engines really nicely, so if you do see that someone is going above and beyond the service practices and doing the oil changes early, that's a nice sign to see. Under the hood of this is an N54 BMW twin turbo straight six. It's a fairly common engine, but it does have a couple of issues that you want to look out for. The oil filter stand housing is common for leaking oil. This one was, so we resealed that. The valve covers on these cars are also known for leaking oil, so we put a new valve cover on that as well. Common failure point, as I said while we were driving it, is the water pump and the thermostat. They're electric. You want to make sure those are well maintained or if they've been replaced once the car gets more higher mileage. Other than that, they're pretty solid engines. We do recommend taking it to an inspection facility so they can really get into it. They'll have borescopes and they'll have lights and a better way of inspecting the car. But from a visual standpoint, if you're just looking at one of these yourselves, you can poke around under the hood and see general common leak areas, as I said, around the oil filter stand, the valve cover along the side. There are a couple things you can check when you're own, and you'll also want to look to see if it's got any aftermarket pieces under here that were either installed badly or if it has any bad signs of maintenance if you're looking at one of these cars. Up on the hoist, there's not too much to look at underneath this car. The front thrust arm bushings can generally need to be done. That's a very common BMW problem. In a place where there's high gravel or salt, the height level sensors get seized on these cars, so we did replace those on this one. With the pan off, we checked for any lower oil pan gasket leaks. This one didn't have any, so we were good there. And you also want to check for uneven wear on the tires. These are all things you can check on the ground, other than the oil pan leak, which would be hard to see. Other than that, there's not too much specific about this car that you want to see. The front subframe is aluminum, and it's very well rust protected, so it's a really solid car underneath that you don't have to worry too much about. We hope that was helpful if you're in a market for one of these cars. It was a lot of fun to service this one because they're really unique and rare, and they're a lot of fun to drive. And if you're looking for any more of these, we are going to put more on the channel, so please like and subscribe. And this is Devlin from Motorwork.